He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, we got a really cool episode for you. A friend of mine, Alex Bruesewitz, is one of the up-and-coming stars of the MAGA movement. He's a super high-energy guy. You've probably seen him on social media. He's one of the people who is behind the scenes, low-key, one of the most powerful people on the X platform on the right. And even though he's only 27, you've probably seen some footage of him with Trump and other top-level people in the MAGA movement, because he really ingratiated himself with all the right people, and he did it the old-fashioned way by earning it, working hard, lifting up other people. And he became the architect of what I think is a historic moment in the history of media, really, which is Trump's podcast strategy. You guys have heard me talk about this in the past. And, I think the real reason Trump won is that he's got great policies. The price of eggs and the price of gas were too high, the border being open, all that stuff. That was the main thing. But what really cemented the victory for Trump was at the very end of the campaign, where he was going on all these podcasts, reaching people who were apolitical, people who did not know where they stood politically, but had trusted hosts online. And he went and talked to them as himself. Authentic, long-form conversations on turf that wasn't necessarily his home turf. And he reminded people, or showed them for the first time, that he's got that strength of personality, that he's got that unbelievable set of ideas and character and all that stuff that we all know and love about Trump, but a lot of people who aren't necessarily Breitbart consumers might not have known. And the guy, more than any other person who was behind that, is this guy, Alex Bruesewitz. And I get into his backstory and where this revolutionary idea came from, what the execution was like, and what his thoughts were going through this process. Of course, we contrast it with Kamala Harris, who tried and failed at a very similar strategy, which must have been agonizing for all of her supporters and her campaign staff. And so it's a delight. It's super informative, particularly if you got young people in your life. This is a good one to hear because he's 10, 11 years younger than I am, and he's in the room with guys like Donald Trump. You don't get there by accident. There's a lot of tools that are really interesting that he'll give you throughout the episode. This is his first long-form interview that he's done since the podcast strategy helped seal the deal for Donald Trump. So we're happy we got it for you today on the Alex Marlow Show. All that to come is going to be super exciting. But first, I want you all to pay attention to this. This is as serious as it gets. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are racing to lock in radical policies before Trump takes office on January 20th. And they're not just winding down, they're trying to cement control. Biden's already signed Executive Order 14067, and banks are actively testing a government-controlled digital dollar right now. This isn't about modernizing currency, it's about controlling you and your life. And they want to track every dollar you earn, save, and spend, every single one. And here's the kicker. Once this system is fully implemented, it'll be nearly impossible for Trump to undo it. The radical left and the global elite allies will have a permanent grip on your financial life long after they're out of power. Trump's called this a dangerous threat to freedom. J.D. Vance has warned that it could mean total government control over your finances. Folks, this is real. It's happening now, but you're not powerless. That's why I'm bringing in my friends at Priority Gold. And they've created a new free wealth preservation guide to help you fight back. It lays out 3 critical steps to shield your savings from this overreach. So all you have to do is text FREEDOM to 24999 right now to get your guide. That's FREEDOM to 24999 or visit prioritygold.com. Don't wait. Text FREEDOM to 24999 today and shield what's yours. Let's hear the interview with Alex Bruesewitz. All right, today on the Alex Marlow Show, we've got a guest on who you might not know yet. Maybe you do if you're an X user, but I think you will eventually. This is one of the up-and-coming stars of the MAGA movement and someone who's got an unbelievable work ethic and a lot of vision, someone I've known for quite a bit, but I've never interviewed before. Alex Bruesewitz is with me. Alex, can you share with the audience what your background is, where you came from, and even though you're a young guy, you've been in the game for quite a while already. Tell me about your evolution to becoming sort of a social media fixture in conservative circles.
Well, thanks for having me on, Alex. And I don't know where my invite was to come on your show over the years that we've known each other, but now that we're together, it's an honor to be with you.
I apologize. You busted me. I busted myself there. Just gave it away.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. But no, I kind of came up through the Twitter streets. And, I started a Twitter account, or an X account now, when I was in high school, 16, 17 years old. And this was right around the time that President Trump was flirting with running for president. And my first interaction with the president came in 2015, April of 2015. I just turned 18 years old. And I tweeted a picture of the sign on Trump Chicago, and I said the sign on Trump Chicago will look just as good in the White House. And the next thing I know, Donald Trump's retweeting me, 18-year-old Alex, coolest thing in the world. And fast forward, 9 years later, I've been an ardent Twitter troll for the president, and kind of turned it into a business and a movement, and been able to be part of some really cool things. But I came up just through posting pro-Trump social media content, and then I figured out how to get in some cool rooms and figured out how to stay there.
So there's a lot of art to it, obviously, but there's a lot of science. And I think that there's more to being an effective troll online than just being and Missy, you might have to bleep this next word for any of if we're trying to make this a family-friendly show, but the shit posting. There's a difference. And there's a difference in just causing problems and actually trying to get momentum. And I know this is probably something that would take a college class to explain exactly what it is, but help us understand what is the difference between I'm just having a good time annoying people and I'm actually getting something done that's dead serious, which is moving an agenda forward.
Yeah, I think there is an art to it, and there is certainly more behind it than just posting fun content online. Don't know if I want to give away all the secrets because I don't want the enemies to know what's coming. But there's an ability to. I like Twitter in particular. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer. I like Twitter in particular because it's kind of like the world's group chat, where it's the only platform in the world that you can get the attention of basically anybody. You can't get it on Instagram. You can't get it on Facebook. You can't. Twitter, you have the ability to get the attention of almost whoever you want. And what you do with that attention is where the power comes. And so kind of having an understanding of that has certainly shaped my usage of it. And also just getting to know all of the politicians. X is the most important social media platform for all the politicians. They have social media teams and staffers that are dedicated to monitoring what people are saying about them on X. Some are concerned if there's negative feedback. Some respond to the negative feedback by pivoting and going a different direction. Some respond to the negative feedback by getting into the weeds with the people who are criticizing them, and they have a very emotional reaction to it. But most are paying attention to it now. And when I first started becoming, a Twitter troll, if you will, not everybody was paying attention. But now 8 years later, everybody's paying attention to it now. Everybody's got a team dedicated to monitoring what's being said about them. And, it makes the game a lot more fun.
Yeah, it definitely is exciting moment on that platform. And there's a saying that Twitter is not real life. And I think about this a lot because some days it doesn't feel like real life. Some days I'll feel like there's something that's trending online. Then you'll see some sort of a poll, and then the poll shows that the public is not where the Twitter space is. But sometimes it does very much feel like real life in the sense that all these politicians, they seem to break more news there than anywhere else. They used to have to call up a major news outlet, and then sometimes they would go on, television news, which still has its power. But it just feels like that's the go-to place for politicians to voice whatever is on their mind. And that's very real. Have you played with that concept of is it real life? How much of it's real life, or is this a tension you have with yourself, or you've a solid answer to that question?
Yeah, something that I've always done is I've surrounded myself with people and maintained friendships dating back from when I was 5 years old, and they're still my closest friends to this day. And they're not as hyper online, if you will, as I am. And I can use them oftentimes as like a kind of like a sounding board. And, if I am kind of spewing some Twitter talking points or X talking points, and they're like, Alex, you sound like a crazy person. So you have to kind of massage the message and figure out how a normal person, how you can communicate this issue to a more normal person, because I don't think I'm a normal person very, very much, to be honest. But I think now more than ever, X is becoming more aligned with real life. Before Elon bought it, I think CNN put up a poll. 63% of X users considered themselves Democrat, and only 30-something% considered themselves Republican. Now it's 48% Democrat, 47% Republican. It's about as even as you can get. So I think that makes it more aligned with real life than it was before. But there are still moments where something that's super hot online doesn't translate into the rest of public opinion. But I think that's slowly but surely changing. And also, if you look at X's numbers, they're getting more and more users, while all the other social media platforms are kind of staying stagnant or they're dropping. Like, nobody I know actively uses Facebook anymore, and maybe that's why Mark Zuckerberg is trying to be a new version of himself, which seems to be,
that's why he's wearing the chains, he's wearing the tall tees. It's because
it seems to be a nice evolution, and I hope it's legitimate. But X, their usage is going way through the roof. More normies are getting on there. They're getting more of their news from X now rather than some of these other traditional means. And the platform is much different now than it was 5-6 years ago.
So you were very involved, though, 5 or 6 years ago, and it's probably about when we first connected. And do you feel like that there's, in terms of what is the type of content that's popular, I feel like it's changed a little bit. I think a lot of the content that was most popular then was sort of adversarial fighting, right versus left. Now, I don't know if that's it. There's a lot of self-improvement. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of conservatives, posting MAGA memes. Do you feel like the texture of the content is changed in a significant way? And if so, from your observations, what are the most significant changes?
Yeah, I think so. I think the beauty of X was the debate, was the ability to go back and forth with your adversaries. I think it's the most video game-like social media platform, and I think that's my personal. I play video games, and so a great example is just recently a former congressman, not the brightest guy. His name's Joe Walsh. And, he represented Illinois in Congress, whatever. But he was criticizing the personal life of Pete Hegseth. And he put out a tweet, criticized personally. And I responded with an article from Politico from 2013. And it basically highlighted how Joe was accused of taking his new girlfriend on foreign vacations while falling behind $140,000 on child support. And so I screenshot that and posted it. I said, Joe, are you really the best person to be criticizing somebody else's personal life? He fires back. And he goes, well, that's a hit job. And, that was planted by political enemies, da-da-da-da. And so I responded. I said, say that's the case and you're not actually a deadbeat dad. Wouldn't it be fair to give Pete Hegseth the same consideration? Never responded. Point for Alex Bruesewitz, right? So that's how I go in viewing that stuff. And so it's like a video game esque platform, for me. So I think the debate is important on X, and that's why all of the Democrats are trying to run to this Blue Sky app, and they're going to push themselves into the social media ghettos instead of staying and fighting and da-da-da-da. But I think the content, for the most part, for the political discourse, I think it's still there. But I also think people are learning that you're not going to change the minds of the people who are picking the team. So there's the Democrat team on X, there's the Republican team on X, and sometimes there's overlap. But you're not really, you're you're not really changing.
Yeah, I don't think there's as much, and I think that's sad. I think that this is part of the left, their evolution with cancel culture, and how this concept of not platforming people, which we were the guinea pigs for that at Breitbart, where they're like, well, we can't platform these people, and I said, well, your life's going to get a lot more boring if you do that, because the debate's the spice of life, and now they're in this spot where like we can't even exist on a platform because a guy who endorsed Trump 3 months ago, not a guy who was OG MAGA, a guy who endorsed Trump 3 months ago, owns the platform. So we got to go to a whole new platform where there's nothing going on other than us talking in an echo chamber. Give me your take on Blue Sky, because in a way, I'm okay with it, because I think, in a way, I'm excited about it, because the left is going to be very comfortable there, and they're going to say incredibly stupid stuff, and I'm going to grab it, just like we've always grabbed left-wing Twitter at Breitbart, and we've turned it into billions of page views. We're going to do that exact same thing at Blue Sky. That's not going to change. But I miss that when I opened up my Twitter feed, that I couldn't see where their heads were at, and then now I can't anymore. It's like I get the MAGA stuff and the memes, and that's it, and I don't really get any intelligent conversation from people from the left, and that is missing, I think.
Yeah, no, it is missing, and I think that's disappointing. And I don't think I'm going to go as far as downloading Blue Sky and suffering through reading those posts. But I'm glad that you're going to do that.
Oh, we have different sense of humor then, because that's how I have fun.
I'm glad that you're going to do that. But I think it's foolish for them to push themselves into echo chambers. And I think that they still don't understand why they lost. They still don't understand that their policies and their thoughts are unpopular with the greater country. And going to an echo chamber like that will only shield them from reality even further. And so I think it's a stupid strategy for them. But we'll create our own fun on X without them. And I think they'll end up coming back. But I think Blue Skies, it's actually kind of a terrible naming, terrible branding. If you look at the usernames, way too much language in the usernames. Like, I think X is great because you have to, you can only use a certain amount of characters for the username. Keeps the timelines clean and fresh. And I'm not a fan of Blue Sky. I'd encourage them, if they're watching this interview, I'd encourage them to try to change the name of it, try to change the branding a little bit, and but I think most of them will ultimately just come back to X.
Yeah, interesting. I hope so, because that would be really great, at least in terms of me being able to curate the news. So you've been credited with being one of the masterminds, if not the mastermind, behind Trump's podcasting strategy, which I think was actually a historic event. And I've been calling for him for as long as I've known him, which is about, 9 years at this point. Stop doing the Meet the Presses. I understand that's not going to stop, but that's what I've asked him to do. And don't do the New York Times. If you're going to put stuff out on your own, that's great, because that's going around the media filter. But go talk to alternative media and make that be what you do. And he's always been good about talking to alternative media, but something shifted at the closing months of the campaign, where he made one of his primary outlets reaching people on podcasts, on Twitch, on things that were mostly apolitical. He didn't go to places that were leaning hostile, but he went to places that were open-minded at a minimum. And I think this really allowed for that narrative that Trump is a fascist, he's a Nazi, he's not one of us, he's not a human being, he is someone we can other, we can unperson, we can try to jail or murder. I think that notion that was an acceptable point of view completely went away with this strategy. So it is hopefully going to set the framework for a huge revolution that is not just going to be devastating for the establishment media, but I think is going to build up an alternative media space that's potentially going to create much more interesting content over the next 100 years. And I think it could really come down to this moment. That's how big of a deal this could be. Talk to us about how intentional this was. Give us some insight into what the discussions were, what the strategy was. I want any insight I can on how this started to come together, that Trump was going to target these particular shows.
Well, it was very intentional, and it actually dates back to 2021 when we tried to, the president, to reclaim the celebrity image of Donald Trump. And the first moment of that was when Donald Trump did the UFC walkout in July of 2021 for the very first time. It was the Conor McGregor Poirier fight. It was, Conor McGregor's last fight. So, thus far, but it was crazy. It was packed in Las Vegas. I was in the crowd as like a bystander for that. And the front row was Justin Bieber and NFL players and Machine Gun Kelly and the hottest celebrities you could possibly imagine. But then all of a sudden, Donald Trump walks in and the crowd roars and Mel Gibson salutes him and then, Trump was back. And at the time, it was so important because, that was just 7 months after he left the White House. He was a political pariah, according to many. This guy was done, But Dana White in that moment kind of helped him reclaim that celebrity image and kind of, bring him back into the light. And it was an incredible moment. And then shortly after that, President Trump sat down with the Nelk boys, just kind of these mainstream influencer types who are relatively apolitical, and they're frat bros and they do funny things with beer and whatever it may be. And Trump knocked it out of the park with that interview. And he got 5-6 million views in the interview. Trump, one thing that Trump loves is ratings. And so when he saw that he got 6 million views on that, he wanted to do more. And then as
one thing that I want to catch up from the audience who might not know the Nelk Boys are. So these are guys who are mostly YouTubers who are it's bros hanging out, younger guys. I'm guessing they're 30-ish and younger, and they've got a huge YouTube popularity. And it's not political stuff, but it's certainly not woke. It's certainly anti-woke. And one thing that Trump did is he didn't pander. He just was himself. And that was cool. And I think that is a huge part of why this works for him. You see Kamala Harris shows up on shows or goes to different – Hillary Clinton, the same thing. Barack Obama does the same thing. They're different when they show up different places. And Trump was just Trump. And these guys just loved it. They're eating out of the palm of his hand.
Yeah. And it went crazy. He had 6 million views in less than 24 hours. And then what happened was it got taken down off of YouTube. So in 2022 – YouTube deplatformed some of the hottest mainstream influencers. And that's when a lot of these people started waking up to, wait a second, everything Trump was saying about big tech censorship is real. They just took down this video. And so they became victims of the big tech censorship that, what came after conservatives and came after President Trump for all those years. So that was interesting. So Trump understood the importance of podcasts like that. Then the Republican primary came along. We did our thing with Republican primary, did a lot of alternative media, within the right-wing ecosystem. Trump would have dinners with right-wing influencers at Mar-a-Lago and and then come the general election, we had the right flank. And so, we had this, and I would communicate a lot with our conservative partners and conservative influencers. And so we were thinking, like, how do we start reaching, independents? How do we start reaching, some of these more moderate people who are relatively tuned out of politics? And so podcasts were a no-brainer. And, we had great people like Dana White or John Shahidi, co-founder of the Nelk Boys, who would recommend us certain podcasts. And I would kind of became the liaison between the podcast world and the influencer world and the campaign. And so we just would track them down. And it was totally intentional. And all we wanted to do basically was find opportunities for President Trump to showcase who he really was. And one of the talking points I got sick of hearing was, I like Trump's policies, but I don't like Donald Trump. Like, as somebody that knows Donald Trump, who's gotten to know Donald Trump, this is the coolest guy I've ever met in my life. So how can't you like him? Look what he accomplished in business. Look what he accomplished in media. Look what he accomplished in politics. Look at all of the different side quests that he's had in his entire life, that he's knocked out of the park, all the celebrities he's met, all the moments in history that he's been a part of. This is the coolest guy to walk modern earth. How the hell can't you like this guy? But then
this is huge. So this is what you're seeing here is you're seeing not a weakness, you're seeing opportunity. Because the truth is, anyone who's gotten to know Donald Trump, and I was one of the first public people to be supportive of him, and Breitbart was the first major outlet to be supportive of him back in 2015. So I'm not speaking exactly from an unbiased place here, but he is the coolest hang you'd ever meet. There's no one you would rather grab a beer with. Ironically, he doesn't drink, but there's no one you'd rather grab a beer with. on earth than Donald Trump. And I would say that if you disagree with him on every word that came out of his mouth, he is the most interesting person to hang out with in the room. And so you're hearing people don't like Donald Trump as a person. You're hearing, oh, then we got him because we just got to introduce him to people. How do we do that? We go on these shows.
That's exactly right. And basically how we started viewing the podcast is it's being able to have dinner one-on-one with Donald Trump. Basically, these podcasts were dinner table conversations with Donald Trump in front of millions of eyeballs. That's and right. Unfiltered, unscripted. We didn't have questions in advance. This was Donald Trump being Donald Trump in front of millions of eyeballs with some incredible, dinner guests. And very fun conversations. No topic was off limits. There were contentious questions that were asked. It wasn't totally friendly fire, not totally friendly, but we just introduced who Donald Trump is to the world. And so my favorite part about the whole podcast was seeing in real time the reactions to people. Like, wow, I've never seen this side of Donald Trump before.
Yes.
Or, wow, this is who Donald Trump is. Like, I love this guy. He's hilarious. Say what you want about Trump's policies. This guy's hilarious. So some started justifying, like, well, but maybe I don't. Well,
people were saying after Rogan, that it's been a big hoax, that people had covered up who he was, and of course it is. But it's not language I would have thought to have used because I'd known they had covered up who he was for as long as he's been a public person. But for someone who didn't know, who not a Breitbart reader, is not getting my content, they wouldn't know that they'd been lied to the whole time about his personality. Right. And that's kind of that's what we reclaimed. We reclaimed the image of Donald Trump in the 2024 election. I think that had a major impact on why he's going to the White House. I think also, obviously the economy is terrible and the border's in crisis and the global chaos and the conflict. And but I think that reclaiming the image of who Donald Trump actually is as a human being. I mean, 9 years ago, this guy was the most popular person in the world before he went into politics. He was invited to every celebrity's party. He was invited to every major event. He was honored everywhere he went. There's pictures of him lighting Kate Moss's cigarette. Like, this guy was the coolest guy to ever possibly walk Earth. And that's how he was portrayed in the media up until he ran for president. And and so that ground was kind of seeded. We kind of allowed the media in a way to paint that image of Trump for 4 years or for 8 years. But we reclaimed it this election cycle. And now people are like, holy crap, I love Donald Trump. This guy is awesome. And, the people now get to see who he actually is. So I want to focus on what we do with this momentum, because this does feel like a historic opportunity. But first, I got to get your comment on why this was not figured out by all the geniuses who Kamala Harris paid the $100 billion, whatever it was, how they didn't figure this out. And when they tried it, it had mixed results. You could hear the anguish in the voice of the campaign people when they were doing that postmortem. That was ironically on a podcast that I listened to. And they were struggling with the Joe Rogan stuff. Was just, you could tell that their brain was in a pretzel over that. And the podcast that they did do got really mixed reactions. The Call Her Daddy podcast is probably the most famous example, where the host was kind of ragging on them afterwards. Why couldn't they pull it off? Because they must have seen what you guys were doing. They're not that dumb. Like, they had to see it, and they could not counterattack. They could not parry the attack at all.
Yeah, it was actually a very fun situation, because right around the time that we started our podcast, circuit, where we hit one after another, Kamala was becoming the nominee. So there was right before we did the Theo Vaughn podcast, Kamala became the nominee, and but she wasn't doing any interviews at the time. And we were hitting her, hey, you've been the candidate now for a week. Why haven't you done any press interviews? Then so on and so on and so on. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is sitting down for a new interview with a new podcast every single week. And so we had 4 or 5, 6 podcasts under our belt before Kamala Harris even did one press interview. And so we kind of had and we were getting such positive press. People were like, Donald Trump's podcast strategy is working. Da, da, da. And so Kamala thought, hey, it's actually working. The polls are shrinking. I'm going to start doing podcasts too. And then there's also almost a beauty in her wanting to go do interviews, because the more people heard from her, the less they liked her.
Yes,
but we
that's
kind
right.
of baited her into doing the interviews, thinking that it was as simple as, oh, just put Kamala on a podcast and see what happens. The problem with that is Kamala came across as fake and scripted. Donald Trump comes across as real and authentic. And, we live in a generation right now where we get fed so much content on our phones all day, every day when we scroll, and we are able to decipher what's real and what's a paid ad, right? And when you scrolled past a Donald Trump interview, you thought, wow, that's real. That guy is legitimate. That guy is like authentic. When you scroll past a Kamala Harris interview and you listen to her and she goes, I grew up in a middle-class family. Like, you're like, okay, you're probably very scripted politician. And even her interview with Call Her Daddy was a dud. And it's hilarious that she made her whole campaign centered on turning out young women to vote. And part of the genius thought process of Stephanie Cutter and whoever set up that Call Her Daddy interview was that Call Her Daddy reaches more young women than any platform in the world. And then post-election, the exit polls come out. Kamala did 7% worse with young women than Joe Biden did.
Right.
So what that tells me is that, more people heard from Kamala, the less they liked her, and her doing podcasts actually hurt her.
Yeah, it certainly did. And I think it did cut to a lot of her weaknesses, which is that she's not good on her feet. She's not particularly bright, and she is overly scripted. And all of that, if you spend enough time with her and you can't fake it in a 45-minute, hour-long, 2-hour-long unscripted thing, and then you see the difference where Trump is incredibly nimble on his feet and Kamala is not. She's just not that bright. And I don't say this to be mean. Of course, I know it's mean to say that, but she's just not. I mean, the other Democrat standard bearers have a lot of IQ points on Harris, and that comes through when she's left on her own for an extended period of time. So they knew they couldn't really do that if they wanted to win, but they also couldn't ignore these demographics. And I think that that's just a huge thing because it does set a new standard for what it's going to take, I think, to win presidential elections going forward. You've got to be able to just dialogue with people. J.D. Vance is also amazing at it. I mean, I did a 2-hour interview with him. He doesn't have a note in front of him. He speaks fluidly on a million different topics. So you can look for that inevitably in the future. And so I think this strategy is here to stay. So what do you think do you think this plays into the way the Trump administration is going to message that you continue to use these outlets? Because a lot of them are not going to want to be political all the time. But because it feels like an effective way to potentially not just to campaign, but to push policy.
Yeah, I think there's some chatter about that. And I haven't necessarily had really in-depth conversations on this topic at the moment, but I think it's important to understand that only 37% of Americans now get their news from the traditional press. So if less than half of the country is getting their news from the people who are sitting inside the White House correspondence room, well, maybe we should figure out some other voices and some other people that actually communicate with the American public. Maybe they should have access as well. And so I think there's going to be some conversations around that. I don't know exactly what that looks like. But I think what we showed is that the attacks by the media, they don't hold the same weight if you ignore them. And you don't need the media necessarily to get your message out. And so I hope that Republicans moving forward take note of that, and that understanding will give the media's lies less weight. And I think that's the most.
Well, what's it like? Well, what did Trump do to prep for these things? Does he do? Is there any prep that's involved, or
he shows up? He shows up.
Yeah.
And this guy can, and talking about IQ, like this guy can riff about any topic, about any subject with anybody for hours. And this guy is incredible. I mean, he's lived the coolest life. Like we put him on a podcast with Barstool Sports, Bussin' with the Boys, 2 NFL football players, right? Trump knew exactly what draft pick the Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen was picked. without even looking at notes. He knew exactly what round he was picked in. He knew that the Buffalo Bills owner has a daughter who is a good tennis player and just played at the ladies U.S. Open. And, he knew exactly that Brock Purdy, the 49ers quarterback, was the final pick of the draft. Like, he has this knowledge about every single topic, and he has an ability to communicate with anybody. And I haven't seen anything like it. And, J.D. Vance is also incredibly gifted at communicating with just, with people. But, Trump is so unique in that regard. And so there's no prep. He goes in, he sits down with the hosts, and he gets right into it. And,
but this is a huge advantage when creating quantity of content matters a lot, and you don't have time to be scripted, just because if you're doing too many drafts of too many things, and you're doing murder boards, which is what they call when you're grilling someone before they go in a big interview, which Harris has to do because she's a donor created entity. She's not a real person. She's an AI, and you got to put the input into the AI, or for her to have any chance of her saying anything coherent and smart, because she can't do it by herself. She just can't. And Trump is the opposite. He's probably the more people are in his brain, he probably just gets less fresh and less authentic.
Yeah, he is who he is. And I think as a team, we have tremendous trust in our candidate. We have tremendous trust in Donald Trump. We have an understanding that when you put him in front of people, he's going to go win them over. And these are really unique formats to do that with. And what was another interesting part, and kind of sidetracking, is like another interesting part of these podcasts is following the podcast, the media would come attack not just Trump, but they would also attack the hosts of the podcast that platform Trump. And these are people who are maybe like Trump curious at best when they had him on, not necessarily voting for him, but then the media comes and attacks them, probably push them closer into our corner. A prime example of this is, I'll go back to the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Trump was talking about, his days of being a football player with two NFL players. And they asked him what position he played. He goes, well, I played tight end, but I didn't like it too much because, you go to catch a pass and, you go get hit by a guy that comes from a tough neighborhood, right? And the Washington Post hears that clip and thinks, wow, I'm going to write this and connect it to racism and say that this was racist.
Yeah, of course. No, I know it. I know their playbook. I wrote a book on it. So I know where they're going.
And then
that's
they go,
a racist statement.
The hosts go, because they laugh. They're laughing. They're having a good time. And these are NFL players who played with teammates of all ethnicities and all backgrounds. And they're trying to write a piece about how the hosts are also racist because they laughed. And they reach out to one of the hosts for comments, and he responded in a very classy fashion. He farted in the phone back to the Washington Post reporter. And
it's what they deserved. It's the only appropriate response, to be honest.
Right. But the media doesn't understand that when they just don't have any self-awareness, and they don't understand how ridiculous they are. When everybody else listens to that interview, they think Trump's recollection of his days of playing football is absolutely hilarious and relatable. And the media and the Democrats listen to it as like this crazy, this is a racist and da 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 da. And a lot of these people are insane. So
there's a big question here, which is that we've got all this momentum, and it's a historic opportunity. The fact that Trump won the popular vote, that he won more electoral votes than he even won against Clinton, it all sets us up in a spot where we can lock in a lot of these changes for a long time. But I think we've got to continue to make progress with the culture, which is happening. So what do you see as the keys to continue that cultural momentum we've got? Where are the places that we need to be focused on coming up in the next 3 to 6 months here?
Well, I think mainly keeping. I think the media has never been weaker. I think the mainstream media, the trust in the mainstream media has never been weaker. And I think for the most part, we took their power away with how we closed out the campaign. We didn't need them. We proved that we didn't need them. And we proved that their lies were, falling flat on the American people. And I look at kind of the transition process right now and the cabinet nominee process as a way to, keep that power away from them. Look what they're doing to, President Trump's nominees, the lies that they're saying about Pete Hegseth. They're calling Tulsi Gabbard as a wonderful person, a Russian asset. They're lying this just horrible, made up lies using unnamed sources to go after these people. And the Republicans have the opportunity to just stand firm and say, we don't believe you. You guys have zero credibility. And if they confirm the picks, it keeps the media powerless. If they capitulate, then the media feels empowered again. It's really that simple. And so we have the power to keep the momentum going. We are on offense right now. And I think that so many Republicans, we've been playing defense for so long that so many Republicans forgot how to play offense. But we are on offense right now. And I was on a meeting on the Hill the other day with some senators. And one of the senators praised the Trump campaign for being able to remain on offense. And they said, how do we do it? How do we stay on offense? And I say, well, you have to catch the ball and you have to move the chains. And it's really that simple. We control our own destiny. If you want to use a basketball analogy, it's make it, take it basketball. If you score points, you get the ball back. And, we'll keep scoring as long as we don't give the ball to the other team. And the media so desperately wants the ball back, but, we just can't give it to them. So we have to keep.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a political element to this, which is that we cannot cave on any of these nominations. Trump has done a great job nominating the most hardcore person imaginable for each spot, and he's got to keep that up. And then we got to stand by everyone, and we can't tolerate. We have zero tolerance towards allowing the media to torpedo any of the key people Trump wants in there. And once he starts laying out agenda items, he's got to go for the most aggressive things first. Shutting down the border has got to be the starter. Opening up the energy sector, take on all the bad guys on the left right away, and not wait a year or two or three like last time, and not give an inch. I think that's the formula from my vantage point.
Yeah, I think that your formula is pretty, spot on. And I think that's the position that most Republicans want to take. And, some are a little bit of late learners, but I think that we're going to bring them all along. I think that there's a fun vibe right now amongst the Republicans. And I think that the message that I took to them on last week, Thursday, was well received. And I'm very optimistic that every single one of our cabinet selections gets through. But we control our own destiny. I think that's the biggest thing that our voters also know. Our voters look at, we have the White House, we have the House, and we have the Senate. So no excuses. And, maybe somebody wants to go blame Chuck Schumer for something or da-da-da, but that message isn't going to be accepted by our voters. And so I think that our voters are really awakened right now. They understand that that if President Trump faces pushback, that pushback is coming from other Republicans. And then the voters might ask, why is that? And they might try to potentially remove those Republicans. And so I'm hopeful that we don't have to do that. I'm hopeful that everybody works together and we can get our country back on track.
So let me ask you about some of your personal background, because you're a young guy and you're in the room with President Trump. You guys are making jokes. I saw this viral clip of you suggesting Harris was the best looking vice president. And then he said, you think she's good looking. And then you said better than Dick Cheney or something, which was just hilarious. It's awesome. And then, it's got to be, even though I'm sure you knew when you were much younger that you were a special guy and had a lot to offer, but it's still unbelievable, see those, you're hanging out with Donald Trump and taking meetings with him. But what do you attribute some of your success to? If there's younger people in the audience who are watching and thinking that I want to get into some of those rooms and I don't want to wait till I'm 50 to get in there. I want to get in there earlier. What are some of the steps they could take?
Yeah, I think having patience is important. I think that I've seen a lot of young people, they come in to politics or a job or whatever it may be, and they feel like they need to be in the room immediately. And,
Yeah.
It took me 6-7 years to get on, like, really on the radar. And I credit Donald Trump Jr. for kind of bringing me into the fold and kind of elevating me in certain regards. And Don's, a great person and a great friend. But you have to be patient, and not everything's going to happen overnight. Another thing is it's not what you know, it's who you know and who you get to know, and be a good person. I think I like to think of myself as a good person. I try to provide value to people I meet along the way, and I like to ask for very little in return, and then trust that ultimately that will be given. But you have to put yourself out there. You have to go identify how you get in the room, and also when you get in the room, you got to know what to say. So
I want to key in on you saying you asked for little in return, because I think this is very important, and it's and I think that the quid pro quo stuff is very exhausting to people, and it feels like, I'm not saying that it's not a part of life. It is, that a lot of people want their back scratched, and if they're going to scratch your back, that you better be prepared to scratch it back and to understand and play the game in that way. But don't keep score. It's not gonna help you, because people remember, smart people remember, people who are going to stick, who have longevity, remember who's helped them. And I think that that's a big thing. And that if you approach each day with integrity, I'm going to do the best job today, I'm not going to totally keep track. And look, there's some slights. I'm not saying don't forget people who are abusive or dickish to you. Like, yeah, fine, of course. But it's, for the most part, just being available to be helpful to people. That was exactly the thing that I did that really worked out for me, because I made a lot of cool friends. And I made a lot of cool friends because I thought it was cool just to help out cool people. And that ended up, all of a sudden, my Rolodex was really long. And that is a great piece of advice. The other thing I like that you said there is that even though you're a young guy, you felt like you had to be patient. I felt very similarly. I toiled in complete obscurity for several years, where I was working, 20-hour days from a 1-bedroom apartment, and no one even knew what I was doing. And I felt like I was helping change the world on Andrew Breitbart's behalf. And then all of a sudden I had cool titles, and everyone was taking my phone calls. And it took a lot longer than anyone who would read my bio would think it wasn't a long time. Well, it felt like a long time to me. Those are long days of working without getting any credit. And that's fine, because I believe in the mission, and you got to find a mission that will compel you to put in those long days and hope you get the credit, but you don't need it to feel like you had a good day at the office.
Right. It was funny, like throughout the work on the campaign, I wasn't really publicizing my involvement in anything. And then, there comes this beautiful hit piece in a publication called The Atlantic, which,
my favorite.
It's a nice publication, but for the first time, it credited some of the work that I was doing on the campaign with the podcast and stuff like that. And I was like, wait, maybe I can talk about it. Maybe I can talk about it now. But, that's it. You can't go in with the mindset, I need credit for this, I need credit for that. And I like to actually give credit to others. Post-election, I think I went to my Twitter feed and I gave shout outs to like 30, 40 different people on the campaign, talking about all of the great work that they've done. And that's just how I am. I like to elevate people. I also understand that there's a lot of people who are much smarter than me. They're more talented than me in certain things. And I try to bring them along with me. I try to grow them on social media. Or I try to bring them into rooms. And I think that is a quality that I've learned to be relatively rare in politics. I think a lot of people in politics become very
but it is not rare amongst the super successful people. The person who's like this the most is Trump. Every time you get in the room with Trump, he treats you like you're super important. Steve Bannon's like this. Andrew Breitbart was like this. It's like the people who get to the top, this is how they behave. And a lot of people who top out at a lower level, I do think they do more of the scorekeeping, and there's a way of thinking that you're an extraordinary person, but also thinking other people are great too. Yep. And that's the missing part, is that everyone who you see on TV, who with any regularity, who's getting anything done, they all think they're great. They all have huge egos. But the difference between the superstars and just the regular people who are successful, I think, is that gear. It's that they understand that I'm not going to get here by myself. I need to find the smartest people I can to help me. And that's the message that I think anyone, whatever you're doing, if you're in conservative activism, if you're an accountant, like that's the message for all of you.
Yeah. Yep. You have to understand that, like I'm like the least territorial person in the world. And I think that's unique for me. And, like how could you possibly introduce this person to that person? And what if he gets the business and you don't get the business? I'm like, it is what it is. Like, I don't, for me, I'm just happy to be here. 9 years ago, I was sitting in Ripon, Wisconsin, a very small town of 7,000 people. I thought my outlook on life was I was going to make $35,000 a year, either working at a factory or, trying to sell real estate, which I realized I wasn't patient enough to sell real estate, but I'm patient enough for some reason to do all of this. But, I thought that was my life. And then fast forward 9 years later, I get I was flying on Donald Trump's plane, looking out the window. I'm like, how the hell did I get to this place in my life? And so I was just I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be able to wake up and work in a movement that I love, fighting alongside some incredibly brilliant people I have the utmost respect for. And so if it gets taken away from me tomorrow, I guess this was kind of my posture with the January 6th committee subpoenaed me, as like, look, if you want to subpoena me, go ahead, take my money, whatever it may be. I'm still going to give you guys the middle finger because, F you guys. And, what's the worst that could happen to me? I can go back to my fun life in rural Wisconsin where I can hang out with my best friends every day and, live a very simple life without all of these different headaches. Like, I'm totally at peace if that is ultimately what comes of it. And so, and also a lot of the people I've elevated along the way are in new positions now that can help me. And so I just look at, you have to treat people with respect, and you have to, not think so highly of yourself.
Very nice. Alex Bruesewitz, you're at Alex Bruesewitz on X. X Strategies is your company. Anything you want to plug? I mean, what's next for you? What are you up to now? As I'm guessing you're helping with the transition to some degree. I'm not sure how much you want to get into, but anything you want to share in that regard?
I'm still soul searching. We're gonna make a decision on what we do next very soon. But no, I'm just happy that the president won. We're happy to be in this position, and we're looking forward to a great next 4 years and beyond. Well, you got a little bit of a little part of history there that you're getting a big shout out for in the Alex Marlow Show. So very cool. And I really appreciate you taking all this time, and people should follow your X account to see what you're up to next. But this has been very cool and informative and hopefully inspiring for some people. So thanks so much. Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Really appreciate it, man. All right, that's today's show. Thanks to everyone for enjoying the content, telling 10,000 friends and family members about it, corresponding with me at aloha@alexmarlow.com, leaving comments, all that, 5-star reviews, engagements, all that helps me a lot, and it'll help the show grow and get bigger and better. Thanks for checking it out, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.